So for Thanksgiving week, I decided to revisit The Blind Side from 2009, directed by John Lee Hancock, starring Sandra Bullock, Tim McGraw, Kathy Bates, and Quentin Aaron as Michael Orr, based on the true story of Michael Orr, who was a poor kid growing up in Memphis, Tennessee, adopted by Sam and Leanne Toohey, getting him an opportunity to play for the football team and earning a scholarship to Mississippi or Ole Miss University. With it being Thanksgiving, the film shows a scene during Thanksgiving dinner where Michael spends Thanksgiving with them, allowing them to sit at the dinner table together where they otherwise would sit in the living room and watch TV, or the Thanksgiving Day football game as it's a tradition here in America. Football was pretty big this year for Thanksgiving, with the Giants and Cowboys and the Lions and the Bears. Oh my. Sorry, Wicked came out this week, so Wizard of Oz is still kind of on my mind. I mean, this film is not overtly Thanksgiving themed, but it has that similar feel where you can be grateful or thankful for a situation that's been brought upon you that you wouldn't have had otherwise, if life went in a certain direction that you didn't want to go. In the case of Michael Orr, this guy didn't exactly have a great upbringing, but then this family took him in and showed him a better path forward. And to get some things out of the way, there's been some controversy that's sprung up in the years since this film's release. Michael Orr filed a lawsuit against the Toohey family, saying that they made some money off of him that he didn't really get, or something to do with a conservatorship or whatever, similar to what Britney Spears had gone through with a conservatorship that her father and her mother put her under. And the film addresses the idea that they just adopted Michael in order to get him into Ole Miss and make some profit off of him. Whether or not any of that stuff is true, that's not really my concern, but it does kind of taint the film somewhat for me. But I think if you're at least willing to put that all aside, you could appreciate what this movie is trying to offer, that we can make a difference in the world, and we can be grateful for the opportunities that come our way. Because while Michael's life does change for the better, he's also changing the life of the family that adopts him. If you don't know what the movie's about, I am going to go into some details, so if you're sensitive to spoilers, that's your warning. But really, this movie is about this family in Memphis, Tennessee, Leanne and her family, adopting Michael Orr, who doesn't really have anywhere else to go. He's not really great academically, but he is able to absorb certain types of information if he's able to present it in a way where he can succeed in school. He's feeling very uncomfortable, unable to fit in with everybody else, very depressed about his predicament in life. Then he starts to catch the attention of Leanne, played by Sandra Bullock, who in her own way is very no-nonsense and a very tough cookie to deal with. We'll get to this as we go on, but Sandra Bullock in this film reminds me a lot of what my mother will say and do in certain situations, has no filter, and does not take any BS off of anybody.
I'm not cutting, I'm just asking. Let me tell you something, all right? We have been sitting around here for over an hour, and when I look around and all I see are people shooting the bull and drinking coffee.
And considering that she is from Tennessee, Southern hospitality has an ugly side to it if you cross it the wrong way. The film opens with a monologue by Leanne talking about Joe Theismann being taken down by Lawrence Taylor in this big game with the then Washington Redskins and the New York Giants, where Joe Theismann never played a game of football after that big injury that he took at the hands of Lawrence Taylor, that at any given moment, all it takes is 1 second of the trajectory of your life to go in a different direction. And that's exactly what happens here with Michael and Leanne. Once he associates himself with the Toohey family, Leanne starts to peel the layers back one at a time in order to get to know what Michael's like. He starts improving with his grades so that way he can become eligible to play on the football team. And it starts off really awkward. Her husband Sean and her daughter Collins aren't really sure what to make of Michael, but their son SJ, who is the most hilarious kid, maybe if not one of the most hilarious kids I've ever seen in entertainment, takes on the opportunity to get all the attention and the protection from Michael, and doesn't really seem to have a filter for anything, just like his mother does.
And me, well, as you know, I do it all. And Mom was a cheerleader, which doesn't exactly count, but don't tell her I said that.
It's girls volleyball, Mom. You didn't miss anything. Collins is probably the last one to get used to Michael, and I think the movie could have gone deeper into this because there is this aura of uncertainty or uneasiness that Collins feels, or at least supposedly feels in the beginning, because one of Leanne's friends makes this very ignorant comment that Michael's going to try to make a move on Collins, when in reality he's just a big teddy bear who wouldn't hurt anybody else unless they threaten someone he cares about. And the film mentions that he scores 98 percentage points in protective instincts. He might not be great academically and everything else, but he can protect everyone around him that he cares about without hesitation. Makes him the perfect candidate to be an offensive lineman for a football team. With this being a biopic, the film I think is very, I guess you could say, sappy or schmaltzy, as I've heard some people say. I think even Sandra Bullock had that to say in the years since this film's release. And while, yeah, it does kind of play on those sentimental types of feelings, the film doesn't really hesitate to go right for the throat with the emotional weight.
Never had one before.
What, a room to yourself?
A bed.
Even now, watching it earlier today, all I said was, whoa. You never really have any idea what someone's been through. Quentin Aaron as Michael Orr, I think, was the perfect fit for this character. He's able to really communicate a lot of things without saying anything, and when he says certain things, it hits you in the right spots and makes you feel all the right emotions when appropriate. He hasn't really done anything worth mentioning since then, just some smaller films, to my knowledge. I looked up his filmography a little while ago. Besides The Blind Side and maybe an appearance on Law & Order, I don't really recognize anything else that he's done. Maybe he's one of those actors that wants to have some kind of modicum of fame and not so flashy in the spotlight. And you know what? That's perfectly fine with me. Because he honestly doesn't exhibit a movie star type of vibe, if you know what I mean.
Where were you taking him, Mike?
To the bus. It was time for him to go home.
As for Sandra Bullock, I have to say, this is probably one of, if not some of the best work I've ever seen her do. Similar to Quentin Aaron as Michael, she's able to communicate what she's feeling without saying much. Like when she hears that Michael has never had a bed before, she just walks out and sits there in silence, unable to comprehend what he just said. And then when they adopt him into the family, she gets up to have an emotional moment to herself where everybody else is just relishing in what he's accepting from them. And she does the same thing at the end when she allows him to go to school and she can't bring herself to say goodbye to him initially. Presents this really tough exterior on the surface, yet a big puddle of chocolate underneath. Whether they admit it or not, that's what hard asses are like. Because some of the dialogue she has is just pitch perfect. When she breaks down to Michael how he should look at playing on the field, there's a reason why she won an Academy Award for this film for Best Actress.
Oompa Loompa here is your tailback. When you look at him, you think of SJ and how you'd never let anyone or anything hurt him. You understand me? All right, go back.
As for Tim McGraw, he doesn't really have a huge part, but he's the supportive husband who gives Leanne the guidance that she needs in order to help Michael and figure out what's the best move to do with him going forward, and counsels her where she realizes that she should have asked Michael if he wanted to go to Ole Miss or any other school that he might have been looking at. Now, I'm not really a fan of country music, and Tim McGraw's music is not really my go-to, but I really like him in this one, and I wish that they had more scenes with him and Michael. The only scene that we get from him where he has a father-son type of moment is when he's talking to him about this poem that he likes, and as Sean breaks down what's going on in the plot of this poem, you watch the scene, you start to see the wheels spinning in his head, Michael's head, when he realizes that he might have something to go on. And I really liked Kathy Bates as the tutor. She's that character that really needs to add some levity to the entire thing. The fact that she mentions that she's a Democrat, whereas I think that the Tuohy family is Republican. In the South, that's not exactly an easy thing to talk about. I mean, the South is very red, and when I say red, it's probably the most conservative area in the entire country. And I live in somewhat of a heavy conservative area up here in Pennsylvania. But of course, the further you go to Philly, the more liberal it gets, but that's not the point. But I do like how Miss Sue is able to help Michael get through some of the classes that he's having a hard time with, and Kathy Bates really adds a lot to this whole thing. But there's a really strange moment where she talks about this scary story involving Tennessee, and it does kind of make me wonder, was this all a plot to get Michael into Ole Miss all along? I mean, she does address, well, you know, you decide where you want to go, but she does kind of lean heavy into this idea that Tennessee's not a good place to go, and the film does show that Leanne is not a fan of the Tennessee Volunteers team, which is kind of funny to think about because my own mother, who's one of the biggest sports fans out there, is a Philly fan just like I am, also loves the Tennessee Volunteers because she was born and raised in Tennessee. And there's a coach that shows up in this film from a certain college team that she cannot stand. Alabama Crimson Tide, and the coach at the time, now he's retired, Nick Saban. Oh God, my mother's gonna kill me for saying his name. To her, it's like saying Voldemort. That's all I'll say. Oh, and did I mention how SJ tries to negotiate certain terms with the coaches that come to talk to him so he could go out on the field with Michael whenever there's a big home game? And he ends up getting what he wants. I'm telling you, that kid is a total riot. Enough with the rugby shirts. You look like a giant bumblebee. But underneath all that stuff with the fun scenes of the football team and him getting into Ole Miss, there's this dark backstory that Michael is hiding underneath, and I think the film could have benefited from delving deeper into those areas. I mean, it kind of does when Leanne goes to find Michael's birth mother. Michael's mother has a drug record, meaning that she's probably had a lot of kids over the years, and isn't able to bring herself to see her child Michael, but has enough grace to say, you know what, Leanne, you take him. You can do a lot better than I ever will. And when a certain woman from the NCAA questions Michael and why he's going to Ole Miss and thinking that the family wants him to go to Ole Miss so they can capitalize off of that, he starts to think that maybe this was all a sham the entire time, going back to his old roots in the projects where he was living in. But then seeing how his friends are reacting to his situation and questioning him on certain things, making sexual remarks about Leanne and her daughter, he gets very defensive and protective and then lashes out when one of them threatens him. And we see flashbacks of him as a kid being taken away by child services. And while I do wish that they could have gone deeper on that front at least, I think it was enough to get the point across that this kid's life was pretty bad when he was living there. And when Leanne finally finds him at the laundromat, he tells her that all he was told to do by his birth mother was to close his eyes while she was doing drugs and whatever else it was that she was doing. And then when he was allowed to open his eyes, the world was a better place. I cannot even imagine what that was like. And it makes me grateful that I had the upbringing that I did. It wasn't exactly a great thing all the time, but my mom was very involved with me and my sister as we were kids. And for that, I am eternally grateful to her and to the God above. So Michael ends up going to Ole Miss, saying to the woman from the NCAA that, you asked me why they want me to go, but you never asked me why I wanted to go. Because that's where my family goes to school, and they've always gone there. Even though she has her doubts, she sees how much he cares for the family and decides, you know what? I guess that'll do it. And then the film ends with showing actual footage of Michael Oher being drafted by the Baltimore Ravens in the 2009 NFL Draft. And what do you know, in the years since then, he went on to win a Super Bowl with Baltimore. With all the controversies and questions about what exactly the intentions were of the family that adopted Michael, the biggest takeaway from this movie, you might not be able to change the entire world, but you could at least make one difference in one person's life by not only helping the person that's in need, but it could also help your own understanding that even if you might be in a better situation than other people, it might make you more sympathetic and empathetic to what other people are dealing with. And in today's day and age, that is something that we desperately need. Even if I recognize some problems that it may or may not have, I can appreciate this film for what it is. And as a sports person or a Philly fan or Eagles fan in my situation, even with the mentions of Lawrence Taylor, which I think I started to say, okay, that's enough. I can have some fun with this regardless. I mean, if anything, just watch it for Sandra Bullock's performance. This is one of the best that she's ever done. So those are my thoughts on The Blind Side. Thank you guys so much for watching. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are on this movie if you've seen it. Hope you guys are having a great Thanksgiving, and I'll see you guys in the next one.